Hello friends, today we come to Romans chapter 2 verses 12 to 16, and I confess this section sometimes is pretty confusing, so let's jump in and see if we can make some sense out of it. This is what it says: "For all who have sinned without the law will also perish without the law, and all who have sinned under the law will be judged by the law. For it is not the hearers of the law who are just before God, but the doers of the law will be justified. For when Gentiles who do not have the law do instinctively the things of the law, these not having the law are a law to themselves, in that they show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience bearing witness, and their thoughts alternately accusing or else defending them. On the day when, according to my gospel, God will judge the secrets of men through Christ Jesus." Now think back with me to chapter 2, verse 6. In that section, Paul says that God is going to render to each man according to his deeds. Each man, Jew and Gentile. And then in chapter 2, verse 11, he says that there is no partiality with God when it comes to his judgment. So what standard is God going to use for various kinds of people on Judgment Day? Well, Paul gives us two classes here: Jews, Gentiles. Let's take the Gentiles first. What standard is God going to use? Well, he's not going to use the law because God didn't give them the law. He says here, all who sinned without the law will perish without the law. I take that to mean that God is not going to use the Mosaic law to judge the Gentiles because they never had that law to begin with. They didn't have the written law of God, but God did give them something else. They had the work of the law written on their hearts, and God gave them a conscience, which is an inward monitor of their actions. And what that's basically saying is that Gentiles know the difference between good and evil, right and wrong. They know they should be obedient to parents. They should have compassion on the suffering. They should be kind to all people. They shouldn't lie, steal, commit adultery, murder. They know these things intuitively and instinctively. So their standard of judgment on Judgment Day is the work of the law written on their hearts and the conscience that God has given them to determine if their actions are meeting with that standard or not. What about the Jews? The Jews are going to be judged by the law of God. That's what the passage tells us. They were given the law of God, and so that will be the standard. The principle comes down to this: God is going to use whatever light he has given to a particular person as their standard of judgment on Judgment Day. Have they lived up to the light that they have been given? And the answer turns out to be no. No one has done that. Not even the Gentiles. They haven't lived up to the work of the law written in their consciences. They just haven't done it. The bottom line is that all people need Jesus. Jews need Jesus. Gentiles need Jesus. All people need the gospel. And that's why Paul will say in chapter 3, verse 9, "We've already charged that both Jews and Greeks are all under sin." So, application: this entire world needs Jesus Christ. They need the gospel of Christ. Even people who have never heard of Christ, they need him. Because if they've sinned without the law, they're going to perish without the law. They need the gospel to save them. And that's why we, as part of God's church, need to be involved in making sure that missionaries and evangelists and disciples are sent throughout this entire world to every people group so that all people can hear the gospel. Before Jesus ascended back to heaven, he said that we are to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And that's still God's mandate on his church today. So, bottom line, are we going to obey? Are we going to get involved? How can we be involved? Well, you can go. Perhaps God will call you to be one of those missionaries to go to a people group. Secondly, you can definitely pray. And we ought to be praying for the different missionaries that we know about and different missions groups, that God would help them to extend the kingdom around the world. And then thirdly, we can give. We can be part of supporting financially those that do go so that they have the resources they need to get the work done. So that's my encouragement for you today. If you're not involved in some way or another in making sure the gospel gets out to the whole world, I just want to encourage you to make a decision today on how you will be involved. Let's do it together. God bless.